Everyone remembers Mr. Ed as the friendly show about a talking horse, but nobody really knew what was going on behind the camera. The voice actor refused to put his name in the credits. Was never the real secret, and one specific scene in late 1965 changed the whole future of the show. By then, things were already falling apart on set. A key actor was suddenly gone. The original sponsor had quietly vanished and CBS made a move nobody expected. The full story behind that final scene is finally coming out. The real ending of Mr. Ed was much quieter than people often imagined. Its final episode, Ed Goes to College, aired on Sunday afternoon, February 6, 1966. That detail matters because the time slot said a lot about the show's condition by then. For its first 5 seasons, Mr. Ed had aired on Sunday evenings at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, which gave it a friendly family spot at the start of CBS's prime-time lineup. Then, when the 6th season began in the fall of 1965, CBS moved it out of that evening position and placed it on Sunday afternoon instead. That move was the clearest public sign that the network had lowered the show's standing. The reason was simple enough. The ratings had been slipping through the 4th and 5th seasons, and the audience that once made the show a hit had started drifting away. By 1965, CBS wanted viewers for its evening lineup who were looking for newer kinds of programs, and a black-and-white sitcom about a talking Palomino horse no longer matched that plan. In television terms at the time, a Sunday afternoon slot often meant a show was nearing the end and the network was preparing to let it go. That final decision came in mid-January 1966. Trade reporting from Variety and Broadcasting at the time points to a mix of reasons behind it. CBS informed Filmways, the company making the show under executive producer Al Simon and creator-producer Arthur Lubin, that production would end. The remaining finished episodes stayed on the schedule through January and early February, and Ed Goes to College became the last one to air. So, the show did not end with a dramatic final scene or a shocking backstage scandal. It ended with CBS using up the episodes it had already paid for and letting the series fade out on a Sunday afternoon. One of the biggest reasons this happened goes back to money, and more specifically to Studebaker. The company had been there from the very beginning. When Mr. Ed first entered syndication in 1961, Studebaker was the founding sponsor and it stayed with the show during the CBS run as well. Arthur Lubin had struggled to sell the series to a major network in 1960 and 1961. So the Studebaker sponsorship became the financial engine that got the show on the air in the first place. Even Wilbur Post's Studebaker Lark convertible worked as part of that arrangement since it placed the sponsor's product right inside the show. The trouble was that Studebaker itself was already in deep decline. It had once been a major American automaker with a strong place in the market during the 1920s and 1930s, but by the late 1950s, it was losing ground to General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. By the early 1960s, its American operations were taking serious losses. The South Bend, Indiana assembly plant stopped production on December 20, 1963. Canadian operations lasted a little longer, but all Studebaker automobile production ended on March 17, 1966. That decline hit Mr. Ed in a very direct way. The Studebaker sponsorship effectively faded out in late 1963 when the American manufacturing side shut down. Wilbur's 1962 Lark convertible disappeared, and Ford vehicles took its place with Ford covering part of the sponsorship. The Studebaker name was quietly removed from promotional material. By the start of the 4th season in 1963, the original financial structure behind the show was already breaking apart. CBS and Filmways did manage to keep the series going for another 2.5 seasons with other arrangements, though the loss of the founding sponsor added pressure that never really went away. By the time the final episode aired on February 6, 1966, Studebaker had already been out of active automobile production for about 7 weeks, and the company that helped bring Mr. Ed to television was moving toward the end of its own story. Another turning point came with the death of Larry Keating. And that loss changed the show in a way it never fully overcame. Larry Keating had played Roger Addison, the Post's next-door neighbor, from the pilot onward. He was not just another supporting player. By the time he joined Mr. Ed, he already had a long Hollywood career behind him. Back in the 1940s, He had worked as one of NBC's principal radio announcers. He had also been part of the Burns and Allen radio and television series, where he built a close relationship with George Burns, who later helped finance the Mr. Ed pilot. By 1963, Keating was a 67-year-old professional with about 25 years of radio and television experience. He died of leukemia in Hollywood on August 26, 1963. During the short break between the second and third seasons, that timing mattered because the production team had already filmed several early third-season episodes with him in them. After his death, Edna Skinner, who played Roger's wife, Kay Addison, stayed on the show for a while. Yet, the series never clearly explained Roger's absence. Kay simply continued appearing on her own. During that stretch, her brother, Paul Fenton, played by Jack Albertson, stepped in at times and handled part of the comic support that the Addisons had once provided together. By the end of that third season, the producers chose to replace the neighbors completely. Leon Ames came in as Colonel Gordon Kirkwood, written as Wilbur's former Air Force commanding officer, and Florence Msickle played his wife Winnie. On paper, that may have seemed workable. On screen, it never clicked in the same way. The Kirkwoods did not develop the same comic rhythm with Alan Young that Roger and Kay Addison had built over the show's early years. From that point on, the supporting cast felt different and the comedy around Wilbur lost a steady source of energy. That loss is often overlooked when people talk about Mr. Ed today, though it mattered a great deal by many accounts from people connected to the production. Larry Keating had been one of the strongest comic performers on the show. His death came at almost the same moment the series was also losing its original sponsor. Those two blows landed within the same general period in late 1963, and together they marked a real shift in the life of the show. After that, Mr. Ed kept going, though it never felt quite as sturdy as it once had. Then there was the larger world around it, which had changed by 1964 and 1965. American television was moving in a new direction. Viewers were showing more interest in color hour-long dramas, sharper comedies, and programs that felt closer to the social and cultural mood of the moment. Mr. Ed still belonged to an earlier style. It was black and white. It ran for 30 minutes. It was built around a talking horse and a warm family comedy tone. Its visual style had been set in 1961, and across the next 5 seasons, it did not really reinvent itself. The show increasingly out of step with the network's plans. CBS was moving its prime-time lineup toward color broadcasting. And by 1965, Mr. Ed was one of the few black and white programs still hanging on in that space when CBS moved it to Sunday afternoon in the fall of 1965. The move quietly admitted what the network had already concluded. The show no longer fit the prime-time image CBS wanted to build. Later coverage has summed up the network's view with one telling word. In the Cord Cutters News 60th Anniversary Retrospective published in February 2026, CBS's reason for the cancellation was described as the belief that Mr. Ed had become too bucolic for contemporary viewers. In the language of the television business at the time, that meant something gentle, rural, family-centered, and out of step for the direction the networks were chasing. That same idea would later shape the broader CBS rural purge of the early 1970s when shows such as Petticoat Junction, Green Acres, and the Beverly Hillbillies were removed. Mr. Ed disappeared about 5 years earlier, though the underlying logic was already there. The network was moving toward a different audience, and the show had been built for another one. One of the most surprising facts behind Mr. Ed begins with the voice. For all 143 episodes, the horse was voiced by Alan Rocky Lane, an actor with a long career behind him. Before this show, Lane had built his name in B-westerns at Republic Pictures during the 1940s and 1950s. He appeared in 38 Western feature films, especially in the Red Ryder series, and he had also done radio work, including an episode of The Lone Ranger. His voice was deep, rough, and strongly masculine, which made it a perfect fit for the funny idea of a horse who could speak with total confidence. Yet, Lane did not feel proud of the job at first. He had spent 2 decades as a serious Western actor, and the thought of ending up known as the voice of a talking horse on television deeply embarrassed him. Because of that, he agreed to do the role only if he could stay anonymous. The whole run of Mr. Ed, the credits did not name him. The horse was listed only as himself. Lane's name did not officially become attached to the role until after he died in 1973. That choice ended up helping the show in a strange way. Since viewers could not see who was behind the voice, the joke felt even stronger. They saw a real Palomino on screen, watched his mouth move at just the right moment, and heard this perfect comic voice come out. For a second, some people genuinely felt the illusion. The mystery made the horse feel even more alive, and Lane's silence became part of the magic. Later on, around 1965 and 1966, Lane started pushing for credit. By then, he could see the show had become a real part of popular culture, and he understood what it would mean to stay invisible forever in something so well loved. Still, the producers would not change the original agreement. What had been decided at the beginning stayed in place. Lane never got on-screen credit. He died on October 27, 1973, at the age of 72. His obituaries finally named him as the voice of Mr. Ed, but the show itself never changed its credits in reruns. Once that secret is known, the next question comes naturally. How did the horse's mouth seem to move so well with the dialogue? For years, people repeated one explanation so often that it turned into television folklore. The story claimed that the trainer spread peanut butter inside the horse's mouth before each take. Then, as the horse tried to lick it away, the mouth movements looked like speech. It is one of those stories people remember because it sounds funny and easy to picture. There is some truth in it, though only at the beginning. Peanut butter was used from time to time in the earliest stage of production, especially around the syndicated 1961 pilot and during the first months of network episodes. Even so, it was not reliable enough to serve as the main technique. The horse did not always respond the same way, and television work needed something more controlled. That is where trainer Les Hilton came in. Hilton had already trained the animal star of the Francis the Talking Mule films, so he knew exactly how much precision was needed for this kind of illusion. He developed a better system. A thin nylon thread was attached to the horse's halter and extended to a place where Hilton could handle it outside the camera's view. When he gave the thread a light pull, the horse felt the tension and moved his lips. Over time, Bamboo Harvester, the horse who actually played Mr. Ed, learned the pattern so well that he no longer needed much help. By around the second or third season, he had started moving his lips on his own whenever he heard Alan Young finish a line. At that point, the performance had become something even more impressive than a camera trick. The horse had been trained to react as if he were taking part in a real conversation. That makes the truth even more remarkable than the peanut butter legend. The myth stayed popular because it was easy to retell. But the real story shows the skill behind the series much more clearly. What audiences were seeing was not a lucky gimmick. It was the result of sharp training, patience, and an animal performer who seems to have been exceptional even by Hollywood standards. That performer was a Palomino gelding named Bamboo Harvester. He was born in 1949 in El Monte, California. His father was an American saddlebred stallion named the Harvester, and his mother was an Arabian mare named Zetna. In technical terms, he came from a mix of American saddlebred, Arabian, and grade ancestry before becoming Mr. Ed. He had passed through different trainers and owners. Then Les Hilton bought him in the late 1950s for the Filmways production. By the time the show began in 1961, Bamboo Harvester was about 12 years old. Everything about him seemed to fit the role. People from the production remembered him as unusually smart, calm, and observant. He responded well to spoken cues. He handled the long hours of filming. He tolerated the heat of studio lights. Day after day, he kept doing the work. The production team also remembered his habits in almost affectionate detail. He ate about 20 pounds of hay a day and he drank a gallon of sweet iced tea. That image alone tells you how much of a personality he seemed to have even off camera. His work did not go unnoticed. Between 1962 and 1965, Bamboo Harvester won 4 straight Patsy Awards from the American Humane Association. Those awards were often seen as the animal performance version of the Oscars, and winning 4 in a row says a great deal about how admired he was during the show's run. He also had a double. Another Palomino named Pumpkin stepped in for action scenes and outdoor shots that did not need the lip movement effect. Pumpkin was a quarter horse and looked so much like Bamboo Harvester that the difference was barely visible. The one clear distinction was a small white spot within the white marking on his face. On days when Pumpkin was used, the crew covered that detail with makeup. After Mr. Ed ended, Pumpkin kept working in television. He later appeared in pudding commercials during the late 1960s, and he was also used as a working horse on Green Acres, another Filmways series that felt closely connected to the same television world. Bamboo Harvester, meanwhile, retired to Les Hilton's ranch after Mr. Ed was cancelled in 1966. That might sound like a gentle ending, but his final years became wrapped in confusion that has lasted for decades. The most widely accepted version comes from Alan Young, who repeated it in later interviews during the 1990s and 2000s. According to Young, Bamboo Harvester died on February 28, 1970, at the age of 20. He had been suffering from arthritis and was having trouble standing. A caretaker trying to ease his pain gave him a tranquilizer, but the dose turned out to be too much for a horse in his condition. He died soon afterward. Even so, that was not the only story people told. Another version placed his death in 1968. A third one pushed it all the way to 1979. That later date seems to belong to a different Palomino, one who looked similar and had appeared in publicity photos for the show rather than to Bamboo Harvester himself. Over time, those overlapping accounts blurred together, and the result was years of uncertainty about when the real star had died and what exactly had happened. Still, the most accepted account places his grave near Tahlequah, Oklahoma. His marker carries an engraving of his head along with the name the world knew him by. For fans of Mr. Ed, that resting place has remained meaningful for more than 50 years. And in a way, that feels right. So much of the show depended on illusion, timing, and mystery. Yet at the center of it all was a real animal whose intelligence and presence made the impossible feel real for millions of people. Across its 6-season run, Mr. Ed brought in a surprising number of famous guests. And over time, many of those appearances faded from popular memory, even though some were remarkable for their moment. The biggest name was Mae West, who appeared as herself in the 1964 episode Mae West Meets Mr. Ed. She was 71 at the time, and her appearance turned into one of the most watched single episodes of the whole series. Some later accounts even treated it as the last major American television appearance of her career, which gives the episode an even stronger place in the show's history. Another early and now easily overlooked guest was Clint Eastwood, who appeared in a 1962 episode called Clint Eastwood Meets Mr. Ed. He was only 32 then, and he was still mainly known for Rawhide, the CBS Western that was airing alongside Mr. Ed on the same network. At that point, the Sergio Leone films that would make him an international star were still ahead of him. He had not directed a feature film yet, either. That makes the episode especially interesting because it catches Eastwood before the legend was fully built. He plays himself in a light, self-aware part with Mr. Ed giving him writing advice. And for many viewers, it stands as one of the earliest extended comic performances of his career. The guest list did not stop there. George Burns appeared during the run, which carried its own bit of history because his company, McCadden Productions, had helped finance the show's $70,000 pilot. From the very beginning, Sammy Davis Jr. showed up, too, along with Zsa Zsa Gabor and Sebastian Cabot. Taken together, those names gave the series a level of star power that felt unusually rich for a half-hour family sitcom in the mid-1960s. The show's easy family premise helped, and so did its Sunday evening prime time slot. It gave major performers a chance to appear before a huge audience gathered at home, which made Mr. Ed a very appealing stop. Away from the guest stars, the show also picked up a strange legend that lived on for years. It centered on the theme song written by Jay Livingston and Ray Evans, the same songwriting team behind Mona Lisa, Que Sera, Sarah, and Silver Bells. The tune opens with the line almost everyone remembers, "A horse is a horse, of course, of course." Livingston himself sang it. He had first recorded the song as a demo for the producers, but they liked the loose, natural feel of his version so much that they kept it for the broadcast. Years later, the song drifted into a completely different kind of story. In the late 1980s, a rumor began spreading in conservative religious media that the Mr. Ed theme, when played backwards, carried satanic words. The claim appeared in more than one Christian fundamentalist newsletter from that period, and a few evangelical sermons in the late 1980s and early 1990s repeated it as an example of hidden evil messages in mainstream children's entertainment. The line people claimed to hear varied a little, but one common version was, "Someone sung this song for Satan." What gave the rumor its life was not evidence, but the way the human mind tries to make sense of unclear sound. Every technical look at the backwards audio has found no hidden satanic message in it. What listeners believe they heard fits the idea of apophenia, which is the tendency to find meaningful patterns in random or uncertain input. Once that kind of suggestion takes hold, people start hearing what they expect to hear. That is why the myth kept resurfacing, especially during the short but intense wave of backwards masking fears that moved through American popular culture in the 1980s. No documented evidence links Livingston, Evans, or anyone involved with Mr. Ed to subliminal audio tricks of any kind. The song was simply a theme song, and the rumor became one more piece of American religious folklore that attached itself to pop culture. After the series ended, the people behind it moved into very different final chapters. And those later years add another layer to the show's story. Alan Young, who played Wilbur Post through all 143 episodes, kept working for decades. A new generation came to know him as the voice of Scrooge McDuck in DuckTales from 1987 to 1990. And he returned to that role in later Disney projects as well. He died on May 19, 2016 at the age of 96 after one of the longest careers connected to the original primetime television era. Connie Hines, who played Carol Post, stayed active for a while in guest roles through the late 1960s, then stepped away from acting in the early 1970s. She died on December 18, 2009 at 78. Alan Rocky Lane, whose voice gave Mr. Ed his personality even though he was never credited on screen, died of bone marrow cancer on October 27, 1973, at 72. His ending was especially sad because he spent his last years in growing poverty and never fully benefited from the fame of the role he helped make unforgettable. Larry Kading, who played the first neighbor, Roger Addison, died of leukemia on August 26, 1963, at 67. Edna Skinner, who played Kay Addison, retired from acting in the late 1960s and died on November 17, 1999, at 78. Leon Ames, who later played Colonel Gordon Kirkwood, kept working in film and television for another 26 years and died on October 12, 1993, at 91. Arthur Lubin, the creator and producer of Mr. Ed, had already built a place for himself in Hollywood through the Francis the Talking Mule films long before this show came along. He stayed active in television and film into the 1970s and died on May 11, 1995, at 96. Les Hilton, the trainer who worked with both Mr. Ed and Francis, retired from animal training in the late 1960s. He died sometime in the 1970s, though the exact date was never firmly preserved in the public record. George Burns, whose early support helped bring the show to life through McCadden Productions, lived another 30 years after the series ended and died on March 9, 1996 at the age of 100. So, when people remember Mr. Ed only as a light comedy about a talking horse, they miss how much history gathered around it. The series pulled in major stars at key moments in their lives, inspired a bizarre cultural myth that outlived the show itself, and left behind a cast and crew whose later lives carried triumph, hardship, longevity, and loss. That is part of what keeps the show interesting. Beneath the simple premise, a much larger story was always there, quietly waiting for people to notice.